Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of ChiroHealth USA. We're the network that works for chiropractic. Today, we'll hear from a true powerhouse in the chiropractic profession, Kathy Weidner, also known professionally as Kathy Mills Chang, also known as my friend. With a career spanning 4 decades, Kathy's journey in chiropractic began in 1983 as a chiropractic assistant. Fast forward to 2023, and Kathy is celebrating her 40th anniversary of dedicated service to the profession. That's amazing. Kathy's widely known as one of the premier experts in Medicare compliance, billing, and documentation, armed with certifications as a certified medical compliance specialist, a certified professional chiropractic coder, and a certified professional compliance officer. Kathy possesses a superpower. She makes complex subjects simple, easy to understand, and most importantly, easy to implement. Kathy really has dedicated much of her life to empowering chiropractors and their teams to succeed. Now, most importantly, Kathy's a decades-long friend of mine, going all the way back to her days at the ACA where we first connected. And she is largely responsible for all the good that ChiroHealth USA has done for the profession as one of my mentors and guiding light in the early days of our company. As I've told many people, if not for Kathy, ChiroHealth USA would not be what it is today. So welcome, my dear friend.
Thank you. And what a lovely introduction. I think you think way too much of me, but I love you to death. Thank you so much.
No, not at all. You're one special lady to us, Kathy. So Kathy, with over 40 years experience serving the chiropractic profession, I'm always interested in what Simon Sinek calls the why. So what inspired you to embark on the journey, starting out as a chiropractic assistant? I mean, you've really done it all, lady.
See my hair, what color it is? That's how it grows out of my head now because of all that. So I started out just as a CA, as you mentioned. My brother owned an x-ray company and installed an x-ray machine for a doctor, and found out that his person was going to be leaving to have a baby. And very long story, I ended up there after college. It was a great opportunity. It was me, the doctor, and the wife, and that was it. And it was an old Sherman grad, so $300 a day, which was crazy time. Back in, we threw billing forms in the air and checks came down in those days. It was not hard work, but every bit of it I had to learn myself. But more importantly, what happened is I got chiropractic health care. And I would say that within 2 years, my health completely turned around because I was very sick even as a teen, but especially as a child with pretty bad asthma. And I think from my somewhere down inside, I always felt like I needed to pay that back. And if it was back, I didn't want to become a chiropractor. I think it was, I don't want to touch people's hair. That was some weird thing I had in my mind. But I can tell you that somewhere in my ethos, I decided that I needed to vicariously help patients. And by helping doctors, I could help patients. And I think that has always been our why. I think that chiropractic is too important and such an interesting fit in the healthcare world that sometimes doctors are their own worst enemy. And if I can help them in any way to be on the right track and lower their risk and increase their reimbursements, then that's what we're all about.
That's worth waking up for every day. So
yes,
you've been around this profession for 40 something years. What do you see as 2 or 3 of the most significant changes in the profession since you started back in 83?
I think the advent of the E&M codes and chiropractors being deemed physicians for the use of those codes, although we're getting hosed now and nobody wants to pay for them. That's a different story, but hopefully the fight is on. And I would say managed care is another big piece. About the time that I moved from Arizona to New York, my husband at the time was transferred to West Point, and I learned about MPN at the time, which was the old precursor to ACN, which is now God knows what. And it was a blast in the face for what that looked like in the early 90s. Yeah. And all of a sudden there were these reimbursements that were just shrinking. And I would say if there's a third piece, it is the implementation of the CMT codes. that chiropractic finally had their own code set, which some people curse and say that was the worst thing that ever happened. But I think if this is a profession that wants to be unique, they needed their own codes, and that was very impactful.
Yeah, and the reality is, without the it's a double-edged sword, like you said, for some people. But the reality is, without specifying that it is chiropractic manipulative treatment or therapy, there's no way we could glean the research that we are getting now. If we were just
Yes.
falling under general codes, we would not be able to parse that out. And the good news is, every time there's a study done on chiropractic, it's for the positive. It's like Dr. Jim Parker used to say, it succeeds because it's right. And you mentioned managed care. I have a different term. It's called mangled care.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And they talk about when managed care came along, they talked about cost shifting. And really what we saw, if you had workers' comp and PI and other types of injuries, people would be charging more to those. And so that's cost shifting. What managed care did in my mind is it was payment shifting. It shifted payment from the doctors to the intermediaries. And
Yes.
yeah, so those truly are significant. So in your experience, lots of it, what are some of the most common pitfalls or mistakes that the average doctor makes in Medicare billing and documentation, and what's the best way to get their heads around it and to make sure they're not doing that?
I think I have an umbrella answer to that maybe first, and that is that too many of our practices do not allow their team to be properly trained.
Amen.
They expect them to osmosis it, or go to all the free things they can find, or go and let them YouTube or whatever. And they're not properly trained. And I think the biggest challenge there is that these team members, particularly if they work in billing or anything related to that, they have the doctor's, future in their hands. They could be, I literally just did a practice billing profile review of findings for a doctor, and they were still billing 97012 for the roller table traction, which is, first of all, mostly experimental, unproven. Most payers don't pay for it as a thing, but they're referring to it as 97012 mechanical traction, which it isn't. And the girl had no idea. And so if you're the biller, certainly the tack I took when I worked in practices where my responsibility was to protect the doctor, and I was equally responsible to make sure I was educated. So I think that's overarchingly a really big piece. I think the other thing, certainly, we both talk about this a lot, is this nature of the way that doctors want to discount incorrectly and try to just not only make their lives more complicated, but put themselves at risk that's completely unnecessary, when there is something like ChiroHealth USA that just is the way to fix it. Of course, the simplest way, smartest way. But I think that the challenge is often doctors don't even know it's a thing.
Yeah.
Just like they don't even know it's seemingly that it's a thing that you need to be enrolled in Medicare to treat Medicare patients.
Yeah, I think we both responded to something on one of the Facebook pages that we follow. It
yes.
blows my mind, as long as Medicare has been around and chiropractors have been involved in it, that there's still that
confusion.
It is really, really strange. I've seen this happen over the years. There will be a practice that has a person that's going to be leaving the practice, meaning they got one foot out the door. And I think one of the worst things you can do is hire a new staff person and have it trained by the person that's got 1 foot out the door, or by someone who is just kind of somewhat involved in insurance. What it reminds me of is when you get a copy of something and then you make 300 copies of it and it degrades. And so what's you get a copy of a bad copy, and, all of a sudden you got problems in your office. So docs, absolutely. And I, as a chiropractor, hated really doing all the training because I just want to see patients. But the reality is, if your office isn't running smoothly, it's probably because you hadn't put the time, effort into A, training yourself, and B, training your staff. I mean, you just got to invest in them.
Well, it's interesting because the way you describe the copies, I won't get this exactly right, but years ago as a young CA, training at the feet of Jim Sigafus, I could recite what he shared about how often the skin cells reproduce and how often your visceral cells reproduce. And when you have interference, they're not going to reproduce correctly. They're not going to reproduce, and that degrades in the same way you're talking about copies. And that's exactly what I talk about when I speak of training. And the good news is, doctors don't have to do it by themselves. They just have to, we like to use the tagline, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know someone who does.
There you
And
go.
that's what we exist for, is to help
That's what
with
KMC
those
is.
kinds of things. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah. So, Kathy, starting practice in 85, and then seeing my folks practice, literally going back to the early 60s. I remember, I still keep the index cards that my parents had, where they had their notes, and literally
Yeah.
on one side of a 3x5 card, it's their
Oh, yeah.
notes. You flip it over, and it was the billing history.
Information.
And
Yes.
yeah, and I joke with, I tell people that it was amazing to see what happened when they, that was before they had any insurance at all in this state. And then when they had the insurance, you had to go from a 3x5 to a 5x7.
Yeah. Well, I was going to hold this up. This is about the size of what I remember, and it would be across down the middle. So you had 4 years, and
Yeah.
then
Oh, yeah.
they were just simply squares, and you would mark the square, and the drawers would pull out, and you would flip it up and mark the square, and you were done. That was my first practice back in
Those
'83.
were good old days.
Mercedes 80s.
And looking back and going back to 85, we were always busy in the office. Man, how things have changed. I mean, we've got compliance, OSHA compliance. We have to ensure our documentations. There are just so many non-clinical things that have to go on in a practice now. And, in the medical profession, I mean, having been in the spine center for a number of years, they got billers, they got coders, they got their compliance officer, they got all these people. How do you suggest that doctors and their teams manage all of this chaos? I mean, where do you even begin?
Well, it's first important, I think, for providers to remember that while it is a healthcare practice, it's also a business. And there are business considerations that have to be taken into. Granted, we may have some more regulatory stuff than, TJ Maxx does, but in that same vein, we have obligations as a business owner. So I think the frustration I hear often when I'm out teaching is, why do we have to do this? Well, because you chose to be in this business. So first of all, just own it and move on. Now, look for ways that you can streamline and make that easier. Most important thing that I think doctors forget is that it's scalable. And if I'm a one doctor, 2 CA, one doctor, 1 CA, one doctor spouse office, what I have to do and what I have to keep up with is tremendously more simple than a practice maybe like yours with multiple doctors and all of these things. So I think sometimes you look at the whole elephant and think it's, but when we break it down, it can be done in a stepwise fashion. It can be done with help of outside people like we all do. And it can most certainly be scaled to the size and the needs of the practice. And I also always like to say, I will quote what you and I both learned as we were training to be medical compliance specialists. And that is that our job is to tell the doctor everything they need to know to make their own decision. We had a very interesting, we do a weekly specialist meeting with all our certified specialists, and they can bring questions from clients. And someone had a question about a doctor that wanted to really do some interesting things with their professional courtesy policy. Because
we've said the DC stands for Doctor of Creativity. We just make crap up.
You're famous for that. That's right. You love that phrase. And what they wanted to do is, well, 2 of my staff members have really good insurance and we want to be able to bill it. But how do we do that without collecting their copay and deductible? I'm like, dude, we used to do that in the 80s. We can't do that anymore. You can't do that. So they said, well, what if we just automatically give every person an $80 credit per month? Well, what are you doing? What are you trying to make your life hard for? And that's the truth. Some providers just don't want to keep it simple. And there's such an easy way to keep it simple. And, what I hope is, and this is actually our purpose, is that we bring hope and peace of mind to the business side of practice, because we've been there. We've 350 years experience in the profession. We know the things that can bite you in the fanny, and the things that you can, maybe parse out and worry about in a priority fashion. But I think doctors that are trying to do it by themselves just get frustrated. And, there's a reason that I have a healthcare attorney, an employment attorney, a CPA, a tax lawyer. I have all these people, not unlike Henry Ford with all his buttons, right?
Yeah.
You need a solution in your discounting. You're going to call CHUSA. Exactly. So
Yep.
I think that's important for doctors to remember, is that we're all here, not with our hand out. We're here to give you a hand up and to try to help you.
It's a good way to put it. Well, hang tight while we take a quick break to hear from our sponsors.
Okay.
We'll be back with you in a minute. Welcome back to our podcast with Kathy Weidner. So, Kathy, I've loved following your involvement with EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with our listeners what EO is and why you got involved in that?
Sure. It's a peer-to-peer learning organization for founders of their business or owners of their business, different qualifications, certainly. And as those things are done, they're chapters. There's about 270 chapters around the world. Those chapters are in 200 and some countries. I mean, they're all over the place. And I belong to the Colorado chapter here. It's the largest organization of peer-to-peer as a nonprofit that exists. There's some out there like Vistage where, there's a paid coach or things like that. But I go there because they're my tribe. They're my people. They're business owners dealing with, doesn't matter what it is. I have a forum of 6 other people that I meet with every single month, and we come and bring what we call the 5%. And the 5% are the things that you just can't talk about with anybody else. I can call my friend Ray and talk about some 5%, and you get it because you're another business owner and you understand. What if, we actually had our highest sales month in history last month. Congrats. I can't just tell that to anybody, because people go, oh, good, I need a loan, my family, whomever. And when you're in these environments, and you can talk about the things that really are the top and the bottom 5%, personally, business, that's what we do in Forum. Beyond that, they bring in incredible speakers and learning events and retreats and learning opportunities. I was just in Singapore. I happen to be on a path of leadership where I serve in growth, which is very much aligned in my own company because we're a membership-based company as well, although we do a la carte services. Every single thing that I volunteer my time on there, I bring back 10x to my company. And I originally heard about it from Dr. Mark Sana, who was a member, and I was whining. I was speaking in Miami, and he came over to have lunch with me, and I was whining about how lonely I was and that it felt really weird being not only an entrepreneur, but a female entrepreneur in this very much gentleman's world.
Space, yeah.
Yeah. And I needed more women in my life. And he said, I've joined this organization. I think you should check it out. And I joined within 2 months after that, and didn't really find my female friends. There are definitely a lot of women, but didn't find my female friends as quickly as I thought I would. But what I did find, honestly, is my tribe. And it has really enhanced my life. I think it's made me a better owner. It's made me a better boss. It's made me a better wife and mother and grandmother. Just because, the people in your forum aren't going to take your crap. They're going to call you out. They're going to call you out on wait a minute now. You've been talking about this 2 months. Why haven't you moved the needle? These kinds of things. So what a tremendous difference it's made in my life.
So as I understand it, collaboration and learning from others are the key aspects of EO. What have you learned from being an EO that you've been able to bring into your work in the chiropractic profession?
So much, because again, it just aligns so closely. The accountability pieces, speakers that have come and talked about, like Simon Sinek and finding your why, people that come and do that. A great example is I'm working one-on-one with a speaker that's working with several of my chapters. I'm a growth director for one of 10 regions. So there are 10 of us in the world, and I'm over 19 chapters in the West. And he does the Introvert's Guide to Sales. And so I've helped him to hook up with a couple of my smaller chapters to come and bring learning events to them. And I attended one. And I had 10 pages of notes. And so much of it is not unlike the sales aspect of chiropractic, where doctors don't want to feel like they have to sell it. They want to be able to have the patient understand it and lean into it. And I wrote a blog about it actually, because I thought it was very interesting to take that model of the introvert's guide to how to do that and position it with somebody that doesn't really want to sell at all, but
Yeah.
but you're educating and you're sharing. And I thought that was pretty great. That's just a recent example.
Yeah. I think that I see that term quite a lot on some of the Facebook groups that we're a part of, this concept of
Selling.
selling care. And, let's face it, most or a lot of people don't like the idea of sales, but really what you're talking about is the ability to have an effective conversation with someone to explain what it is that needs to be done and then let them make their decision. And to me, that's not selling, it's communication. If you're feeling like a salesperson, kind of reorient that in your head. It is my obligation, it's my job, it's my responsibility to help you understand what's going on, how we can help you, how long it's going to take, all the key things that we go over in a report of findings, if you will. And it doesn't have to feel salesy, just be genuine and have the conversation. And people, 9 times out of 10, they'll make the right decision. You'll always have the one, that doesn't, quote, buy in, so to speak. I just hate the negative. I don't like the negativity that is surrounding sales and healthcare. But the reality is, I don't care if you're a neurosurgeon, a plastic surgeon, you're selling all day long. You don't have to call it that, but you're in the business of telling people what you can do and how it can help them, and letting them make those decisions.
I'm in the middle of a course of some dental work, and they didn't blink twice about sitting down to tell me what, I needed to pay extra for this laser and pay extra for this thing over here. It's just part of the game, right? And I think I really had a big takeaway, probably from an EO speaker, as a matter of fact. And the terminology, just to say, sales is helping. That's really all it is helping.
So going back to the conversation about the dental work that you're going through, I had to share this with you. We talk about chiropractors making case presentations and people accepting care. And, I had the same experience when my kids were young. We went to the orthodontist. And I like going to other doctors' offices because I like to see their processes and what's going on. We weren't there 30 minutes. They took pictures of my kids' teeth, put them up on a big flat screen. I said, "Oh my God, I'll pay you to take those down." They show they'll tell you what's wrong. And literally in less than 20 minutes, I had bought $7,000 worth of orthodontia for my 2 boys. And they basically said, "It's $7,000. Do you want to pay it up front and get a 10% discount? Or do you want a coupon book for $176 a month?"
Uh-huh.
It was done. I walked out and I said, "What the hell just happened?"
Right.
I went in there knowing we were going to have a bill, but it's like, I did not anticipate $7,000, but it wasn't even the person going over that had such a high level. She's done it all the time.
That's right.
It's a norm for them, but yet,
same with the dentist that I went to.
But it is just mind boggling that in our offices, we get bent out of shape over having to tell a patient a visit is $65.
100%.
What's that all about?
That doesn't make sense to me. I'll guarantee you that. And I was that person in so many offices where I was the report of findings or financial report of findings person. And I think the first rule on all of that is that you can't sell what you don't own if it is sales. But the reason that it was so easy for me to help people understand why they needed to pay for their care was because of how it helped me. And so to me, I wasn't selling ever. I was just trying to help them understand what could their life be like if they would commit. I think most every chiropractor, at least the majority that I've dealt with, are certainly willing to work out any kind of financial agreements to make it affordable, make monthly payments, do whatever they have to do, so that people can get the care that they need, which I think is awesome. If we would just have that mindset, you're right.
Yeah, in my office early on, I would make the comment, I don't ever want to let a dollar stand in the way of people getting the care they need.
I
Now,
love
that
that.
doesn't mean you can pay $1 down and $1 a week. We got to
Right.
come some reasonable,
That's right.
reasonable payment. But if the other thing that I think sometimes we need to step back and realize is when we are making case presentations, when we are, talking about the cost of care, and you got to make sure that whoever's going over that is in a good place mentally,
Yes.
financially.
Yes.
The worst thing that can happen is you have your person that's over the finances and going over that with patients who has bad credit and can't pay their bills.
Yep.
They're going to
And they
have a
go,
hard.
well, I couldn't afford this. I don't know
Yeah,
how this guy's
yeah.
going to afford it.
And so, they telegraph, oh, you probably don't want to do this, or you might not want to do that.
Right.
And docs, I can tell you one of the times that I absolutely wanted to crawl under my desk and hide was when I decided to start doing some training with my staff on the financial report of findings. And when I heard one of my staff members going over the financial report, holy cow, it was embarrassing.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So, I mean, there are outline scripts, whatever you want to call them, that can really, really make that easy. I know Kathy has some of that. We've got some of that. But you really, if you're going to train anybody in your office, number one, make sure you hire the right person that's
Yes.
capable of doing that. I always tell people, look for a former front desk from a vet's office or a dental office or an orthodontic office, because they're not bashful. And when they see what we charge compared to what those others charge, it's a
Piece of
cakewalk.
cake. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
no doubt about that. So back to EO for a second. We took a little side trip there. Is that something that the average chiropractor might want to get involved in?
Yeah, actually, there's a chiropractor in my chapter. I also know several, throughout the country. There is a minimum for EO proper. The minimum revenue is $1 million per year. So not every chiropractor will qualify, but there's a wonderful program within EO. The lack of a better word, and it's a ridiculous comparison, but it's almost like JV, if you will, but it's for practices that are between 250,000 and $1 million, or any business, still the founder, etc. And what's really great about that is that it's for practices or businesses that want to scale over $1 million within 3 years. There's a PT that is in my chapter that started in, it's called EO Accelerator, started in Accelerator and graduated into EO within 2 years of getting his practice over $1 million. So, and it's peer-to-peer, right? And in this EOA group, they're similar to forums, but they're called accountability groups. And you have an EO member who is your coach. And there are mentors assigned. So you really have a lot of support in that. I would say that whichever income level a chiropractor was at, there is not much of a better thing that they could do. And I'm going to say this with all the love in my heart, because I was one and I did work for one. But when you get everything from a practice management company in chiropractic, you have one story, you have one lane. What I've found so incredibly valuable is, and what I think chiropractors find in EO, is that you're getting a business perspective. Chances are you don't need clinical help. Chances are you know how to adjust and you know how to be a good doctor. These are the things, even marketing things, etc., that are available. The EOA program is based off of we're very familiar with EOS and traction, sort of counterpart or competitor is called Scaling Up. And Vern Harnish, who wrote that book, actually was one of the original founders of EO. And it's based on 4 pillars: people, strategy, execution, and cash. And so the curriculum is divided up into 4 quarters, one focusing on each. At the beginning of each quarter, they bring in a facilitator and do a deep dive, a full day deep dive on whatever that topic is. And then they work through curriculum and processes the other 2 months of the quarter. So I would love to see more chiropractors. I've certainly referred a number of them. There's a doctor in Atlanta that owns a big, 15, 16 offices I know that I've interacted with. And it is really about being a better business person.
Yeah. Then you mentioned the different perspectives that you get. That's one of the things I've always enjoyed about being involved in things outside of chiropractic. I actually subscribe to Podiatry Today and to dental economics. I've gleaned so much from those. I mean, while they're in the healthcare space, they're such a different profession than us, but there's some overlap and there's some things that they do before we do. I would encourage everyone to kind of look outside of your four walls.
Yes.
Whether it's getting involved with local business groups or entrepreneurial groups, there's just so much value. And again, I've been a member of a number of practice management groups, and they've all helped to some degree. But the reality is, there's a lot to be learned from outside the profession as well. And you and I both have experienced it. It is so frustrating to see chiropractors who have such a gift and ability to help people, but if you can't keep your doors open, you can't help anyone.
Breaks my heart.
Yeah, it is really, really, really sad to see that. So, be a lifelong learner.
Yes.
Get outside of your comfort zone. I think some of us, don't like the idea of, well, I'd feel odd going to that group, but expose yourself to that stuff. You will absolutely grow from it.
It's actually one of the core values of EO is thirst for learning.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. I can't imagine not continuing to learn.
Right.
So, Kathy, what's some of the most significant things, new things going on with KMC these days?
Well, we have a couple of what I think are, I'm not going to say growing, but it feels like the people that are coming to us right now are coming with some very specific needs. I mentioned, we're very fortunate to have had our 15 years in business, a record sales month. And again, sales is helping, so I don't feel badly about that. But we have a protocol that we follow in our coaching program that's called Train My Biller. And not unlike what we just talked about, this idea of people that get kind of tossed into the job. This happened. You'll appreciate this story. The reported findings I did from our practice billing profile, which is a great service that we do. We offer a review of coding, statistics, fees, and take you through kind of where the risk might be or where the opportunities might be. And we always find a lot of both. And this person said that the office manager left 3 years ago, dropped it in her lap. She found 10 plastic tubs full of EOBs that had never been posted.
Oh my gosh.
And the doctor said, yeah, just go do it. Well, she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. And she figured it out because that's what she thought she had to do. And so this Train My Biller protocol uses all of the vast resources of our training library that we have and pluses it with a certified specialist to really hands-on with the doctor's office, train the person. We can oftentimes bring billing back in-house, different things like that. It's skyrocketing. And I think it's just because doctors are realizing how much those people really need that training. We're very proud of that protocol. And another is just, we do compliance consulting. Compliance is a very scary thing when it's done on its own. Like, it is not something, the basics are one thing, but to properly do truly an OIG compliance program, there has to be a baseline risk assessment, and it needs to be done and viewed by a professional. It really does. And in so doing that, there could be things that are a little more DIY, but without that professional person guiding and leading, what we find is, and we actually used to have a 100% self-service program when we did away with it because the doctors 9 out of 10 just never did it. And I didn't want to take their money and watch them throw it down the drain. So we do that differently now. But I'm amazed at when that baseline risk assessment is completed and they're able to see, where they are, with a documentation audit, with a coding audit. Most doctors are like, I had no idea. And so, as you very well know, implementing compliance simply just increases, revenue, decreases risk. It's just such a wonderful thing.
Right.
So we're getting an influx of that right now, which I think is great. And those are the fun things that we're doing. I think we're having fun with this practice billing profile that folks are enjoying. It. As always, the good old library. Our help desk is we've had to expand our help desk hours. We get a lot of questions about why we don't just make our help desk AI, and I have 57 reasons why. And I think
AI
even
is a tool. It shouldn't replace a consultant billing and coding and documentation. That's a fact.
well, we actually, had a little shirt on at Parker this year that said,
Okay.
what's the right code? What's the right modifier for this code? And the truth is, in a Google search window, the truth is AI or anybody else couldn't answer that, because I have to ask you 4 more questions before I can give you the
Yeah.
right answer. And so I think that's why our help desk is buzzing as much as it is. We're about to add a second help desk person to help offset some of those hours. But I feel extraordinarily blessed and fortunate to have such an amazing team. I'm not a one woman show by any stretch. We are a strong team, and I was in Singapore, for this event, and never had to blink twice. I knew everything would just stay right where it needs to
That's
go.
right people in the right seats doing the right things, no doubt.
I
So,
learned that from you, sir.
yeah, if people want to learn more about KMC University, what's the best way to get in touch with you or connect with you, Kathy?
So, our website is www.kmcuniversity.com. We offer no charge discovery assessments. Anybody can call and just talk to one of us. That never costs anything. Should you need a deeper consultation, you don't even have to be our member. We can certainly sell you those a la carte and be very on demand about your needs. You can certainly do that. I'm happy to also provide the phone number, but it's also right on our website. I think it's just poke around there and you'll learn a lot about us.
Good deal. So a couple for fun questions.
Okay.
What talent do you have that most people don't know about?
Well, what I used to be able to say is I sing. I've sung in Carnegie Hall. I've always been a singer. And for whatever reason, the last year, my voice has gone down almost an octave and I can't sing. So I don't know what's going on there. It's weird. I don't know what that's about. I was a semi-pro bowler in my lifetime. I know. They have a thing called the Amateur Bowlers Tour. It's for 190 averages and under. And I exceeded my average and got, had to leave. But I haven't bowled in a long time, but that used to be a lot of fun.
I think you also had an experience with Jeopardy.
Not Jeopardy, but I have taken the test all the time. We'll see if I ever wind up there. But I was actually on a show that I won that show. It was called Trivia Unwrapped on the Food Network. And it was based on the show Unwrapped, but it was Trivia Unwrapped. And I won that show. That was super fun.
That's neat. What's the worst job you ever had?
I was a bra fitter at Dillard's.
Oh my.
That's one of the many things we do, right? So I needed health insurance, and Dillard's gave health insurance to part-time workers. So that was, I just had this conversation with my son about it's not unreasonable to have 2 jobs. I had 3 at one time. That's just what you do, right? Because we're trying, we have so much going on in his life. But I was able to get health insurance, and, it wasn't the worst job, but it's that between that and probably when I was in college, I was a banquet server for financial aid. I lasted like 2 weeks.
Good
it was
deal.
not my bag.
Well, thanks for spending some time with us today, Kathy. Always good to catch up with you.
My pleasure.
We need to do it more often, but
we do.
We get busy and need to get it back on a schedule.
We do.
Thanks to everyone for listening to the ChiroSphere podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. Let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future, or what topics you'd like to cover, or you'd like us to cover, and we'll do our best to deliver. If you want to learn more about ChiroHealth USA and how we can help you develop a compliant, profitable discount strategy that will absolutely grow your practice, income, and profitability, call us at 888-719-9990 or visit our website at ChiroSphere.com. That's how you spell ChiroSphere, to find out why ChiroHealth USA is the network that works for chiropractic and you. Thanks again, Kathy. Make it a great day, everyone.
You too. Thanks, Ray.